All right, welcome back to another episode of Kvetching Draftniks. I'm Scott Karasik. I'm joined by Ethan Hammerman. We're going more of an old school feel tonight, where it's mainly the two of us. Um, which I feel like it was you, me, and Alex when we first started the show.
Back on the days when it was on Blog Talk. Yep. But definitely, Zach and Ben are both busy tonight. They will be jumping in a lot throughout the draft season, but we are going to be making this more routine where every Thursday night, at the very least, us two will be on with Zach and Ben as well joining any episode that they want, if they want to join, and everybody else sort of also welcome if they feel like they want to get in on the conversation, they're welcome as well. So it'll be a fun experiment. But we have committed. We are going to do this every week again. It's going to happen.
It's needed to happen for a while. Not gonna lie.
But it's perfect
And
because now we're getting into draft season, so it's getting a little bit more of a important that we do this. And I think that the way that we're going to structure it is that we'll have some general episodes. We'll also be doing position-specific episodes, which will be really good for me because I personally need some more excuses to sort of watch some of these positions that I don't like watching. But I also think that it'll just be a fun time to talk about our differing opinions on things and sort of begin to hash out which guys are good prospects and which guys aren't.
Hey
I
mom, this is
completely
Rachel Star. Welcome to my bed.
did that actually go through.
Yeah, I heard it. No shame.
No shame. That pop-up blocker did not work very well. Anyway, um. What's Kvetching Draftniks without some random pop-ups? Oh man, I feel like I did that on the first episode of the original series too. Anyway,
So,
yeah, we are
we're
going to
going to
go position
start
by
out.
position.
Yeah, we're going to go position by position. But this episode, we still haven't decided which position we're going to do first yet. Because I think that the big thing is we sort of have to decide which position is going to be the least effective by combine times, at least for me, because I actually care about combine times for certain positions. So tonight's a general episode. We're going to talk about general sort of things that we've seen this year. And I think the first thing we need to talk about is in college football, the bowls are upon us. Bowl season is here. We got our playoff. We got our bowl matchups. So, Scott, my first question, I guess, is what do you think is the most interesting bowl matchup that isn't in the BCS? Or I guess not BCS anymore, in the playoff?
Ooh, I'm kind of excited for Louisville, Georgia. There's a lot of pro potential at that game. Um, you got Leonard Floyd. You got, I forget the guy from Louisville's name. Malden, I want to say. As edge rushers, you've got some good, solid running backs like Michael Dyer and Nick Chubb in that game. I know Chubb's not draft eligible this year as a true freshman, but I have a feeling by the time he's done, it's going to be a fun one to watch. Another one that I'm excited for is the Outback Bowl. You got Auburn and Wisconsin. Kind of get to see Wisconsin against an SEC defense, which will be fun. Let's see, Missouri, Minnesota is another one that should be pretty good. I think Missouri's a bit overrated as far as what they really are. They won 10 games, but it was in the SEC East. And honestly, had the ball bounced a little bit differently for Tennessee or for Georgia, they would have headed up the SEC East this year. And then, let's see, what's the other one that I was really looking forward to? UCLA and Kansas State. That was a game that could have easily been in the college football playoff, and it winds up in the Alamo Bowl, which, that's kind of a mediocre bowl, but I'm excited to see it because UCLA always has just random guys who are amazing. And I love watching Miles Jack play. I'm not a huge fan of Brett Hundley, but I think he's worth watching at least. I like Paul Perkins, and I think he's going to be a surprisingly good prospect, not this year, but next year. And then they've got some talent at receiver like Jordan Payton, who's a junior who could come out early, potentially. And then, what's his name? Sophomore. Duarte. Duarte's solid.
Yeah, I love their receivers so much. Massington and Duarte and that entire group. I mean, honestly, Hundley's coming out, but if he had stayed next year, I wouldn't have blamed him because those receivers are ballers. His line sucks, though, so I kind of see why he'd want to get out of there. I mean, the bowl game I'm most excited to watch by far is Ole Miss TCU. I think it's going to be awesome. Again, another game that could have been a BCS game for sure. So I'm just very, very excited to see that. And I guess otherwise, just sort of going down the list, I mean, Texas A&M West Virginia is going to be insanely entertaining. The final score might be somewhere in the 60 to 50 range. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I mean, the thing about Wisconsin is that now that they lost their head coach, that game might be a little bit more boring, which, by the way, is a really weird situation that, I don't know, just kind of crazy about how a coach could sort of just leave Wisconsin, go to Oregon State. Doesn't really make that much sense. But if you want a sleeper bowl game for me, I mean, the one that sort of jumps out is trying to find it on my list, the Cactus Bowl between Washington and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State played Florida State really tough earlier this year, and Tyreek Hill is a great player, and Washington has a really, really fun defense. So that could be an interesting upset possibility and a fun game to watch some really talented prospects. So that's one game that I think is sort of under the radar. Another one that I really like just a little bit earlier in the process is Miami, South Carolina, and the Independence Bowl. Because I want to see more Brad Kaya. I was really low on him early in the season, but he has impressed me the more I've watched. And I probably gave him a pretty bad rap early in the season, so I'm a fan of his now. I've sort of moved to the dark side on Brad Kaya.
Now for the playoff itself, I don't think you could have gone with better fits. You know, Oregon, Florida State, Alabama, Ohio State. Personally, I would have had Oregon as the number 3 team. Florida State is number 1, Alabama is the 2, and then Ohio State is the 4. But as long as those 4 teams are in it, the whole point of them playing the games is for them to actually play the games and the best team wins. So the fact that we finally have a 4-team playoff, I'm excited for it. I want it to go to 8 teams, but I can understand why it won't.
Sorry about that. I was just retweeting out the link. Anyway, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that this year, really, there were 6 teams that could have an argument. So if we went to 8, like Michigan State would get it, and they really don't deserve it, in my opinion. So I'm totally fine with 4. It sucks for TCU. It sucks for Baylor. But I honestly think that Ohio State was the best team. It seems to me the committee just picked them because they needed a proving game from Cardale Jones to then prove that he's good. So really, I mean, they were always the favorite. They just needed a proving game from the quarterback, which I can see why TCU and Baylor fans hate it, but I honestly don't buy the lack of conference championship narrative from the Big 12 because they would have made it if Cardale Jones wasn't as good as he was. Cardale Jones wins, say, 20-17, or something like 17-7, I don't think Ohio State's in. I think that we end up seeing TCU in that bowl game. So I think to me the big thing is that because Cardale Jones sort of showed up, and right or wrong, this is what happened, Ohio State is in that playoff. And honestly, I think that they could beat Alabama. That matchup plays out really well for Ohio State to me. I think Alabama probably is a more explosive team on offense, but Cardale Jones is a really good quarterback. Devin Smith is a great wide receiver, and Alabama's cornerbacks kind of suck. They've always kind of sucked, to be completely honest. Guys like Dion Ballou back in the day, Cyrus Jones, Eddie Jackson got destroyed by Sammy Coates earlier this year, who's with Ohio State's quick strike offense. I think Alabama should be favored in that game. I think they probably win, but it wouldn't shock me if Ohio State would win that game. And actually, just to be different, I'll say that I'm going to give that win to Ohio State. I think they end up pulling the upset in that game. And then on the other hand, I think Oregon is better than Florida State. Jameis, all he does is win, but I think Oregon is going to be able to score in that defense. The one player on that defense who I like more than any other player, though, who is the X factor in this game, is Jalen Ramsey. He does everything for them from the cornerback position. Blitzes, he plays the run really well. He's their best cover corner. He's the best defensive player on that team to me out of any player.
He's Tyrann Mathieu without the baggage.
Tyrann Mathieu, except bigger also, right? Like, he's a much larger player, I believe. I don't have his stats on me, but he might be, and we'll talk about this later, but he might be the best defensive prospect I saw in college football this year. He is so good. But I think Oregon, I believe in Mariota. I think that Mariota can win that game. So yeah, I kind of think Oregon and Ohio State end up meeting in that championship. That would be my guess right now. How about yours?
I'm going to go a little bit opposite of you. I do agree with you that, and I'm probably going to get killed for this living in the South, but I do agree that Ohio State is going to beat Alabama. Yeah. It's a, yeah, I honestly think that Ohio State matches up well. Cardale Jones can destroy those corners with those receivers, and I just don't think it makes sense to go with. I mean, Alabama gets overrated every year because they're an SEC team, because they're the SEC champion, all that. I think it's about time for someone to come in and just shut them up. Oklahoma last year shut them up in their bowl game. It wouldn't shock me to see Ohio State do the same. And then 2 weeks later, I do think that Oregon takes out Florida State, but I think it's a close win as opposed to a blowout. I think it's like a 3 to 4 point win in that game. I think that's a good TV game, though.
Yeah, I agree. And you basically picked the same guys that I did, so really it wasn't the opposite. It was just sort of like the same thing. I mean, I think that Alabama should be favored in that game against Ohio State. I think that they probably win, but I'm just going to pick Ohio State because I think people are overestimating the Alabama defense a little bit. I think Ohio State can pull it off. Now, in the championship, you know what? I think that's a really good for TV game because Ohio State can score, and Oregon can also score, so that's going to be a high-scoring shootout. But I think it makes sense for Mariota to ride out on top with that championship, so I would have to go Oregon in the championship. But I think that could be a field goal game. Ohio State's a good team.
I think that no matter what happens, Oregon ends up winning the whole thing. I think they match up better with both teams. They just they've got the quick strike offense. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the past 3 years. I know everybody likes to talk about, oh no, Mariota's not this franchise guy. But I think if there's anybody who's a franchise guy outside of Teddy Bridgewater, it was Marcus Mariota over the past 3 years. Bridgewater put the best film I've ever seen a quarterback put up. Mariota's a close second.
I mean, the thing with Mariota with me, last year I didn't have first-round grade on him. I thought if he declared last year, he would have been a second-round pick for me because I didn't see the ability to read defenses. I didn't necessarily see the mentality I wanted out of my quarterback. He's gotten so much better this year. Like, you can't even – night and day. And I think that's something that has been a little bit underrated by a lot of people in the draft community. Mariota is not the same player as last year to me at all. I think that he has matured in terms of his reads. He's great on third downs. Last year he was awful on third downs because he tried to run too much. And there was something that I call out a lot. He was actually like bottom in the NCAA for qualifiers, and this year he's number one in terms of converting on third down plays, which is one of the most translatable quarterback stats to me. And just watching him play, it's like night and day. So I would say that Mariota for sure is a top tier quarterback prospect. Regardless of what Kuiper says, I think that he deserves mention in that top five of the class, and I think he'll end up going number one overall. Now, granted, he might not be the best player regardless of year, regardless of position in college football. So I ask you, Scott, who this year has sort of jumped out to you as the best player regardless of position, regardless of class in college football? Who do you think is the one guy who sort of just completely and totally blew you away? Is your favorite player to watch, the best player that you've seen this year?
Amari Cooper. Just
Ooh,
by far.
that's high.
Amari Cooper. Love Melvin Gordon, but Melvin Gordon is definitely a product of his offense. Another one that I would love to say is Gerard Holloman. He's amazing. He's, you know me, I love good defensive play. I love guys who can go out there and destroy people. So I love pass rushers. I love guys who can get after the quarterback. And then I love guys who can go and intercept the ball in amazing coverage. And Gerard Holloman, he's going to pick the ball off. He's the best safety I've seen since, man, that's tough. He's the best safety I've seen in terms of going after the ball, getting after guys. I want to throw a name out there, but it's not going to be a fun. I'm not going to love the reaction, but he's the best ball hawk I've seen since Ed Reed.
I was waiting for a different safety, to be honest.
Best ball hawk I've seen since
I
Ed
was
Reed.
waiting for a safety who is no longer alive. That's who I thought.
No. He's not Sean Taylor. He's not a hitter like Taylor was.
I thought you were going to say Sean Taylor. I
He's
was
not a
waiting.
range guy. He's not a.
Sean Taylor got some ball hawking skills, though. He was so good. Rest in peace.
Sean Taylor had some ball hawking skills, but he wasn't Ed Reed. He wasn't the guy that could go out and play the deep and do that kind of thing. Gerard Holloman, that's Ed Reed. That's Ed Reed to a T, and I'm a big fan of his. I think he's got very, very good instincts in coverage. I think he understands how to read quarterbacks' eyes exceptionally well, and he feasts on bad quarterbacks. If you look at
what do you think about the criticism about his tackling? Because that seems to be the go-to critique, that he can't tackle.
He can tackle, he's just not a hitter. All he has to do is worry about wrapping up, and you've got a great safety. If I had a safety that all he did was wrap up, tackle, and intercept passes, I've got the safety I need in the deep part of my defense. And Drew Stanton just went down.
I'm not watching the game, so I had no idea that just happened.
Ooh, he had 3 Rams just kind of gangbang him there.
So it sounds like via Twitter it might be Logan Thomas time.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. The Rams are destroying the Cardinals season. They took out Palmer too.
So do you think that if Logan Thomas, because this is the thing about Brett Hundley.
Ryan Lindley in.
Wait, are they actually putting Ryan Lindley in?
Yeah, he's out there.
Oh my god.
Watch him throw a pick.
It's just going to slow down my stream, so I'm not going to watch right now. But I will say, Brett Hundley is someone who I think could be like Logan Thomas. He won't end up going as high as people think he's going to go. I think he could go in round 2 or 3. And if he does, he could totally end up coming in for a bad team as a backup. That would be totally a Brett Hundley thing to do. Although last year he would have gone, I believe, in the first round if he had come out. But his attitude, some teams are not fans of his attitude at all this year. But anyway, I'm going to answer my own question regarding which prospect, regardless of position, impressed me the most this year. And I'm very tempted to say Brad Kaya after I rewatched him, because I started to see some things that I was sort of like, wow, I can't believe that this freshman is doing that, but I'm going to hold off a little bit because I was sort of seduced by Christian Hackenberg last year, and I don't want to make that happen again. I'm going to go with a different wide receiver, and I got to go with Devontae Parker from Louisville. He came in, and he just dominates. I mean, this is somebody who literally can get open anywhere on the field. He is so good at releasing against man coverage. And I know that there were some issues with him high pointing later this year, but he could high point last year. I don't think it's nearly as pronounced an issue as some people make it out to be. And he just really, really impressed me any time I watched him last year or this year. I think that his comp for me is Des Bryant. I don't have a number one receiver this year, but I think that in terms of like, the only reason I don't is because I have one other receiver I think is slightly more impressive than him in the long term and has a slightly more unique skill set. But Devontae Parker's going to be number one in the league for a while, in my opinion. On defense,
I think Amari Cooper is. I saw Marvin Harrison comparison for him, and
I
it
can
just
see that.
makes so much sense.
I think Amari, he's also impressed me a lot. The one thing that Devontae has over Amari is I think Devontae cornerbacks in the NFL right now, especially those who play press. I think that Amari has some issues against press at times, and I also think that Devontae is a little bit more projectable in terms of just like he can make some big plays happen like that. I think Amari has sort of feasted on the fact that there are a lot of SEC cornerbacks who aren't very good. But I think Amari is also very good. I first rated him as well. But on defense, I mean, the edge player I think no one is talking about right now, he's my top edge player in the class over Vic Beasley, over Shane Ray, is Dante Fowler from Florida. The guy is a freak of nature. So strong. He's got the burst of Anthony Barr and the strength of a Chandler Jones. I think that it was Rumford Johnny on Twitter who said that he's sort of like a Chandler Jones with a piano dropped on his head because he's so good at using his hands. I mean, pretty much is everything that we want an edge rusher to have in the NFL right now because he has the burst, he has the strength, he has the sort of uniqueness to be able to get off the snap. I mean, really, he's everything that we want right now. I think that we don't need to give horse in the mouth. I think he should go top 10 pretty easily to me right now, based on the tape that I've seen.
The more I watch him, the more I see Jared Allen.
Which, again, not a bad thing. He does everything right.
Or Justin Houston.
He wins in so many ways.
Yeah, they win in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know, they know exactly how to do it, and they win any way they can. It's amazing.
And, you know, I mean, I know you don't like Oakman, but I do like Oakman in a certain context. And I like Ray, and I like Beasley, and I like Bud Dupree, and I like a lot of these edge guys. Eli Harold, huge fan of his as well. This is a really good edge class, but I think Fowler's the best out of the group. I know that there's been some criticism where he gets put on the ground a little bit too much. I think the other guys can put on the ground just as much. So,
I can agree there.
in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I think that this class has sort of begun to shape up with the underclassmen declarations. It's a little bit better than I originally thought it was going to be. I mean, I'm still a little skeptical at some positions. But again, I still need to finalize evaluation on those positions. But it's a little bit better than I thought it was going to be.
I can agree there. I mean, I love watching edge rushers. I'm still kind of getting into the film side of things. The one guy who has been super overrated for me, though, as an edge player, is Hioloe Kikaha. I always mess names up. But I don't understand what's so great about this guy. Like, he's a great college player, but the way he wins is with power at 240 pounds, and he's super slow.
Thank you for joining me. I've been saying that all year. I will say, to be fair to Kakaha, he looked faster this year than last year, to me.
He still didn't look faster than, say,
I saw a little bit more projectability. I wouldn't take him over any of the people I mentioned in the earlier sort of list, though. Like, I wouldn't take him over Eli Harold. I wouldn't take him over Bud Dupree. No way. I would probably take him. A good comparison for him, and this is a very generous one, I think, Alex Okafor on the Cardinals.
Okafor's so much quicker off the ball, though.
I
So
think
much.
Ikaha has Okafor's quickness. I think that that's a fair comparison to make. And I think that's a third-round pick. I don't think that's a first or second-round pick. It's a role player.
It really is. It really is a role player. But, I don't know. I'm just not a fan. And I'm not a fan of Benardrick McKinney.
I need to use him as an edge player, and then maybe he can thrive, but a team's not going to use him that way. And my ranking, honestly, because I said that if he was used as an edge player, I think that I would have a first-round grade on him. I'm probably not going to put him at edge because I've heard that teams do not view him as that. So it'll drop my grade on him significantly. I will say, though, if he's used correctly, he's a beast. I think that he has Khalil Mack's ability if used correctly, but he won't be. So I think it's a shame, but it is what it is.
All right, let's switch to the offensive side of the ball because I thought Devontae Parker was a bit overrated. Mainly because he's got a bit of an injury history, and I think that's going to drop him. But another wide receiver who I think is going to fall is Devin Funchess. Because I think teams are going to see him and go, he's a little slow for a wide receiver. He's probably closer to a tight end.
I mean, I'll be honest. I think if Devin Funchess falls, it's a mistake. He may be a little bit slow. His footwork, his breaks are not a tight end's breaks. They're a wide receiver's breaks. I haven't seen footwork from a guy like Funchess, who's as big as him, in a long time. His footwork is better than Mike Evans in terms of getting in and out of cuts. I would almost compare him to sort of like an Alshon Jeffrey, Aaron Hernandez combination in terms of sort of how he wins. And I think that he's also been a victim of bad quarterback play at Michigan.
You know who won kind of like an Alshon Jeffrey, Aaron Hernandez, combination early in his career? Tony Gonzalez. And he was primarily a slot receiver.
I mean, I could maybe see it. The thing with Funchess is that I think that Devin Gardner is an awful quarterback. It didn't help him that he had to play with him. And I'm bullish on his future. I think that he could be really good in the right system. To the point where I right now have him as my top receiver over Amari and over Devontae Parker, even though I think that all three, plus maybe Kevin White, are really good. I mean, I think it's a good class of receivers. I think Sammy Coates is pretty good. I think that they all win in very different ways, which is kind of cool. Like all of my top four receivers win completely differently, and I love it.
I like Funchess. But I don't think that he's going to be viewed as a wide receiver.
So you think teams are going to view him as a tight end, is what you're saying?
I do. Like I said, reminds me a lot of what happened with, what's his name? Tim Wright. Tim Wright was not viewed as a wide receiver because he's 6'3", 230. He's viewed as a tight end. But honestly, he's really just used as a slot receiver and an H-back. And that's where he wins. Funchess, used as a slot receiver, as that big slot guy, and then sometimes you line him up at tight end in line, I think that's what teams are going to end up doing with him. So,
I hope the Patriots pick him. That would be great. I love that.
I hope the Falcons pick him in the second round.
We'll see what the Falcons end up doing. They are one of the most interesting teams in football this year in terms of what they can do in the draft. So I can see them going any number of ways.
What are your thoughts on the Falcons? Because we haven't actually been able to talk about that.
I did watch the game on Monday, along with other games. I mean, Roddy White does not look the same. I think that he's not a number 2 receiver anymore. I think that there needs to be improvement there. But also, I mean, you need a tight end because Toilolo's awful. You need an offensive line because your offensive line, while better than before, is still not very good. And on defense, I mean, you need to
The
start.
offensive line had no issues this past week.
I've watched other games. I'm not totally new.
If you watch the past 6 weeks, that group that's been out there, that's probably the offensive line of the future. They've been excellent.
So
They've
you
allowed
think that,
7 sacks over the 6 weeks.
so you think that they're going to be the consistent offensive line going forward, so that the team's not going to look.
They've looked great the last 2 weeks. They allowed a total of 1 sack and 2 hits that you could actually blame the offensive line for. Because that Clay Matthews sack was on Matt Ryan.
I'm just so used to you blaming the offensive line. This is so shocking to me.
The offensive line is why they've been close the past 6 weeks. That's why they've gone 3-3 the past 6 weeks. Is the offensive line is held up and the teams look good.
Yeah, the big thing though that y'all need, because I don't think you need a safety either. I think you're good at safety. I think you're good at cornerback for now. I mean linebacker, you need someone to help out there probably, and then defensive end, you probably need one more pass rusher to replace Bierman.
The Falcons need a competent linebacker to help Warlow. The reason why Warlow gets blamed is because he's the one that everybody sees, but it's because the other linebacker is sitting back there getting destroyed by a blocker, by like a fullback or a tight end. If there was another linebacker out there that could actually shed blocks, it'd be great.
So the funny thing is Bernardrick McKinney could actually be perfect.
The
He can
problem
shed
with
blocks.
McKinney is that he sucks in coverage, and Atlanta's back to square one there.
I wouldn't put him in coverage ever. I will say that.
So,
I'd use him as an Akeem Dent type of play in the middle,
but that's already what Paul Warlow's doing.
but he shouldn't be doing that.
But he should be because he's not a coverage linebacker.
So what you need is a coverage linebacker then, instead of someone to move Warlow into coverage, because that's what I thought you needed.
No. The issue with Warlow is he's not great in coverage. He's solid, but they ask him to do way too much in coverage. He should play that short middle zone. That's it, because that's what he's really good at. And then he should blitz like half the time, because he's a really good interior pass rusher. He should be used like Darrell Washington.
Or Jamie Collins now in New England.
I didn't know Jamie Collins was in the middle.
They're
but
blitzing him a lot.
if that's how they're using him in the middle, then exactly like how Jamie Collins is being used in the middle.
A-gap, sugaring it, it's awesome to watch. I don't know if you watched the San Diego game, but he was a monster in that game, blitzing the A-gap. It was great. The other thing that Atlanta needs is a new head coach. I would posit. And I think it should be Brian Cox.
No. No. Brian Cox is not a head coach.
You don't think so?
No.
Not smart enough?
Keith Armstrong is a head coach.
But special teams then? You think because he can manage the entire sort of team?
No, the reason why I like Keith Armstrong is because he's a motivating dude, and Atlanta's special teams units, even in their bad years, like even last year, they had excellent special teams. Like they had one of the top 10, they've always had a top 10 unit under Keith Armstrong, regardless of the talent, regardless of the depth, regardless of anything. They've always had a top unit under Armstrong. One year they set the return yards record for least amount of return yards allowed because of Keith Armstrong's schemes. And Armstrong's a motivating dude. I think, honestly, if there's going to be a surprise head coach hire this year, it's going to be him because he's going to be looked at as a Rooney Rule candidate, and then he's going to Mike Tomlin the interview. And they're going to go, man, we originally just brought you in as a Rooney Rule guy, but come on in. You're the guy we're looking for. You're that angry, foot up their ass kind of coach.
I'm just thinking of the stupidest thing that Dimitrov could do right now and trying to counter with it. He ends up hiring Dan Hawkins. What do you do?
That's not something Dimitrov would do.
Yeah, I doubt it.
No.
I'm not entirely sure
The thing Dimitrov would do, the dumb thing he would do, is hire Rex Ryan.
Oh, okay. That would make sense. I was thinking just like in the vacuum of stupidity. Like not realistic, just like the vacuum of stupidity. But in terms of realism, I think that Rex Ryan is up there. Maybe Rob Ryan as well. Bring in the brothers, replace Mike Nolan.
Now, it could be very, very, very possible that this is going to sound crazy. It could be very possible that Mike Smith sticks around, but they bring in Rex Ryan as kind of like a head coach in waiting and to fix the defense. To where Rex Ryan fixes the defense, sorry, Mike, you're out, kind of thing.
If that happens,
the defense,
I will laugh so hard.
That would be amazing. I would just enjoy that so much.
But anyway, let's move on to the Falcons because we talk Falcons a lot, and we're general. So the next sort of thing we wanted to talk about, I guess, is the 4-3 and 3-4 defenses. Are they obsolete?
4-3 defense?
Which do you think that there's a new model that should be used and should be sort of like brought into like the vernacular of the people where it's like by rolling gap rather than by 3-4-4-3?
Yeah, completely, because there's no such thing as a 3-4 or 4-3 defense anymore. No team runs one specific scheme. No team runs just one specific way of going about the ball, except for maybe like Tampa Bay. Except for maybe like the Rams. Like there's a few out there, but you got to look at what roles these players fit into now too. Because some guys, they don't fit into roles as a 4-3 defensive end and a 3-4 outside linebacker. They're probably a 3-4 and 4-3 defensive end. So what's their role? What's their technique? You got to look at it from what gap would they be best playing in? What's their ideal spot? So yeah, you can call a guy a 34 defensive end or a 43 under tackle or whatever. But honestly, what you need to do is you need to be like, well, this guy can play in the 3, the 4, the 5, and sometimes the 1 as his best spots. This guy can play in the 0, the 1, the 2. He's a nose tackle. This guy can play the 1 through the 5 effectively. He's a defensive lineman that you can just kind of roll. This guy can play 6, 7, and 9 very well, but if you try him as a 5 technique, he's going to fail. So you got to look at every single player and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So sometimes you got to look at and some of these guys, they can't do a hand in dirt 6 or 7. They got to stand up and do a 6 or 7 roll. So you got to be like, well, maybe this guy's an outside linebacker, but I could teach him how to put his hand in the dirt.
And I think as someone totally correctly just said to me on Twitter, no one even just 1 gaps, 2 gaps anymore. Everyone needs to do everything. So it's just like the more flexibility you can offer a team, I think is the more valuable that you are. Now, I also do believe that we are shifting toward kind of what Arizona does, where the strong safety is sort of being rotated in as a third linebacker. We're seeing smaller linebackers, guys minimize in the run game, but also are strong enough to fight off at least some of their blockers and make plays in the backfield. I think that what Green Bay was doing with their 2-5 defense is kind of the way that we might be seeing more teams go in the future, except I think that they get a third guy in there, a bigger linebacker, sort of downhill type, like a Brandon Spikes, who sort of like is able to be flexible and fit right in between that 2 defensive linemen front. I think that that's sort of like one way to counteract that need to have some run support. But we'll see. I mean, I totally agree with you that the 4-3, 3-4 sort of dichotomy is totally invalid now.
Do you remember me saying that teams should start looking towards a a 2-5 defense back a couple of years ago, like, hey, yeah, the 2-5 would be a good idea because you could have some other players, maybe even a 2-4-5 where you had that strong safety linebacker. Now teams are actually doing it, and I'm like, oh, hey, that's a good defense. That's nice to see.
I mean, it makes sense. The way the Patriots do it is they have the hybrid front, where occasionally guys stand up, occasionally they put their hands down. Dominique Easley was standing up a lot this year, which I thought was great. He actually did a good job standing up. But it just sort of goes to show you that the 3-4-4-3 thing, it's not valid anymore. Flexibility is sort of the new key. And if you're not flexible, you're going to have trouble getting drafted highly in the league. I mean, look at Lewis Nix. He had some injury issues, but also he just wasn't flexible enough to go in the first 2 rounds of the draft.
I agree.
And I loved Lewis Nix. I had him as one of my top 15 prospects last year. But I also probably wasn't thinking on the same wavelength as teams who sort of only saw him as a plugger. They didn't see anything else. And I think that, Danny Shelton from Washington, who is somebody who some have said could be a first-round pick, I don't think he goes in the first round because teams aren't going to see him as sort of that multidimensional guy.
Who sees Danny Shelton as a first-round pick?
It was in McGinn's scouting thing.
Oh yeah. The same scouts that think that Atlanta has a bad group of defensive backs because they probably looked at the volume stats and said, "Oh, hey, Atlanta allows the most yards." Well, yeah, that's probably because they deal with the issues known as a lack of a pass rush.
Patriots had to deal with that same thing, so I totally get that. It made our defense backs look bad when in reality they were covering for 6 seconds of play.
Oh, trust me, the Patriots cover for much less time than the Falcons do because you don't have a guy creating pressure, then missing a tackle, then another guy creating pressure, and then missing a tackle. Where Atlanta does. Because you got Croy Bierman. He comes in, he creates a little bit of pressure. Not a lot. A very little bit of pressure. And then he misses the tackle. At least in New England, you guys have 32 sacks.
Yeah, we need Chandler Jones back, though. But we did get Akeem Ayers for a 6th-round pick. And we got a 7th as well, which was kind of absurd.
Yeah, where Atlanta has 15 sacks. They've only hit the quarterback another, let's see. Okay, so they've hit the quarterback another 36 times, but it's always Croy Bierman or Babineau or somebody way after he's thrown the ball. And then they stop playing Jonathan Massaquoi, who in his 4 real games that he's played has 2 sacks, 6 hits, and 9 hurries. And then they benched him because he went to Von McClure and was like, yeah, you know what? I think I've earned more playing time. Which he did.
So they benched him because he went to the media to complain?
Huh?
They benched him because he went to a media person?
No, the media person just asked him a straight-up question. He just told him. He was like, no, I think I've earned more playing time.
I think part of the key, though, is that Hagman needs to play more. Get some of that interior penetration. Because you're not getting it right now from your defensive tackles.
Hageman's not playing either. Ever since Hageman got caught doing that stupid crap during the bye week, his snaps have gone from 15 to 20 to 10 to 15. Oh, and he put 3 against Green Bay.
A wonderful blocked field goal.
Oh no, he's been on special teams. That's another reason. Whenever guys are on special teams for Keith Armstrong, he's like, yeah, put him on defense, and then they don't go on defense, and he's like, what's going on here? So he likes having his special teams guys, but he's like, come on now. Keith Armstrong would be the guy who'd be like, oh, this guy performed on special teams. I'll give him a shot on defense. So he'd probably bench Tyson Jackson for Rashid Hageman.
Well, let's be honest. You should not have signed Tyson Jackson.
Oh, no.
The other guy.
That signing, that was the one move this offseason I said was just dumb. I said, you don't sign Tyson Jackson, period. You go get Michael Johnson instead.
Especially
Michael Johnson hasn't been better. Michael Johnson hasn't been better, but it would have made more sense if you signed Michael Johnson.
Especially after just signing Soliai.
Yeah, you got Soliai, and you got Peters, and you got Babineau. Do you really need Tyson Jackson? No. And you had already had Pere Jerry on the roster. I realize Pere Jerry sucks major donkey balls. But if you're going to draft Rashid Hageman anyway, you still don't need Pere Jerry. With Hageman, Peters, Babineau, and Soliai, you're good. You're not running a 3-4 in the first place, so why do you need a 3-4 defensive end there? And honestly, Malachi Goodman can play that role. He's been playing better than Tyson Jackson anyway.
Well, anyway, moving off of the positional sort of stuff, let's talk about some quick overrated, underrated. Just around the horn, maybe one guy per position. So let's start quarterbacks. Who's one guy you think is being underrated right now, and who's one guy you think is being overrated?
All right. Oh, that's a tough one. All right. Quarterbacks, overrated, Jameis Winston. Way too many interceptions. Way too many. That doesn't just magically drop off. Not by any means. It just won't. Like, way too many stupid decisions that he makes. Underrated, Connor Halliday. Or Halliday, or whatever. Good size, good arm, very accurate underneath, has a good deep ball, steps into his throws, gets some good velocity on it. You know, yeah, he's a system quarterback, but he's a system quarterback who does well in a very pro-style system. If I'm looking at a quarterback, a guy that I can kind of develop and, bring up, I'm going to take Connor Halliday. I'm going to take him, and I'm going to put him in as like a, backup for a couple years, take him in like the 6th or 7th round, and have a guy who's going to, eventually look like a pretty solid starter. Run the same, basically, career path as Matt Flynn.
All right, well, Jameis is always a good guess. I'm not going to steal your overrated guy, though, because I also think Jameis slightly overrated. I have a late burst on him right now, but I need to watch more. I definitely don't think he's as good as Manziel was last year, though, for sure. And that's a comparison that I've sort of keep seeing, but I think that they have some similar qualities, but I don't think that Jameis has quite the, and I hate to say it, it's kind of funny, but I think that he's more impulsive than Johnny at throwing the ball. I think he makes some really, really questionable decisions in the pocket, and it's a little bit scary, but the talent's all there. So, again, give him a year to sit. I think if he sits like Johnny, he could be in good shape, but he needs time. Overrated, though, just because he shouldn't even be drafted, is Sean Mannion. Shouldn't be picked. He's just an awful quarterback prospect. He should end up going on the Enterprise commercial with all the former college athletes who say, I went to Arizona. I played water polo at Duke. I played football at Oregon State. That should be Sean Mannion. He's just not a pro player to me, at least not at this point. Just makes bad decisions, can't convert on third down. He's just not even draftable, not in the stratosphere of some of the other guys, and this is a bad quarterback class. For me to say that is pretty damning. Underrated, though, is Garrett Grayson from Colorado State. I'm a big fan of his. I think he could be a top 5 quarterback in this class. Could sneak into the 4th round for me. He has a good arm. He's really good on third downs. He has good pocket sense. Does all the little things right. And I think that being under McElwain has sort of taught him some of the things that he needs to know in order to succeed in the pros. I think he's one of those fringe backups who could be a pretty good spot starter someday for a team. So Garrett Grayson is someone I like.
Garrett Grayson's a unique guy because I never thought that he was great when I watched him last year, but he's developed quite a bit this year to where I'd be like, you know what, I'd take him in the 4th. He's that career backup kind of guy, but I would take that in the 4th because you can never go wrong with that kind of guy. I don't think he ever starts in the NFL, but he's worth exploring. He's worth seeing what he's got. All right, running backs. I have a feeling our overrated and our underrateds are going to be very similar.
I like Melvin Gordon, so. But no, my overrated is Jay Ajayi from Boise State, who I want to like every time I hear people hyping him. but I'm just not 100% sold on him right now. I think he has talent. I think he could be a very good starting running back in the NFL. Maybe even good, but I wouldn't take him before round 3, especially considering some of the talent this position in the draft. His speed doesn't translate to me very well. I don't think that his power translates very well either. I saw a pretty mediocre team in UConn. Not mediocre, they're bad. They pretty much bottled him up all game long when they played this year. And Ajayi showed me no tackle breaking, no real sort of special skills that some of the other guys in this class have. So he'd be my overrated. I still like him, but he's not my top 10 running back. And I think for a lot of others he is. Underrated, I got to go with my dude from Mississippi State. The guy to me is bust proof. I think he's Maurice Jones-Drew at the next level. He breaks tackles all the time. He has really good hands. He does everything right. He's going to be a heck of a running back in the NFL. I already can see it. He's going to be a stud.
I saw the same thing when I saw Josh Robinson. I saw a lot of Maurice Jones-Drew. Another guy that I really like is Amir Abdullah as an underrated guy. But I'm going to go for my truly underrated guy, Sinjin Days out of Georgia Tech. Extremely underrated. Just a true bruiser right in the middle. In that Jerome Bettis type. Just, he runs, and as he's running, he's looking for someone to run over. He finds the hole. He's got great vision. He's got amazing balance. He's maybe like a 4.55, 4.6 kind of guy. But at the next level, he could be the next Alfred Morris right out the gate. That instant, 1,600-yard running back. You just hand him the ball, he gets 4.5, 5 yards a carry, 4.5, 5 yards, every single carry. And it's just bruising, knocking people over, bowling ball kind of carries. So I'm a big fan of Sinjin Days. I think he could be a huge asset if a team who needed that kind of, that secondary, not really that secondary running back, that primary running back, that short yardage running back, that guy who could be your instant, long-term just runner. And he's a good blocker because he does a lot of it at Georgia Tech. But I think he could also be an even better receiver if they gave him a shot at that too. So, honestly, if I'm going to take a 7th-round flyer on a running back and say this guy's going to be the guy that's my franchise guy, yeah, I know I took him in the 7th round, but who cares? It's going to be Sinjin Days. He's a football player. You know how you've got guys who are football players, and you've got guys that are athletes who have football potential? He's a football player. And then overrated, I've got Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, go on about this because I want to hear about why you think he's overrated.
All right, so the more I watched Melvin Gordon, I kept seeing, you know what, he's very much Terrell Davis. He's very much Terrell Davis. And the more I watch him, in all the ways that Terrell Davis had issues. He constantly does try to break runs to the outside. He doesn't do a lot of stuff between the tackles early. So he's like a younger Terrell Davis. Once he learns how to run between the tackles, I think he'll be excellent. But it's going to take him a couple of years. It took Terrell a couple of years. But I don't know. I'm starting to back off a little bit because I don't like his hands. I don't like the way he runs completely. Hey, I can understand the Jamal Charles comparisons a lot more because I'm yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Jamal Charles either, despite what he does, because, yeah, he's productive, but it's ugly how he does it. That's the way Melvin Gordon is for me. He's productive, but it's very ugly the way he does it.
Yeah, the thing with Melvin Gordon is I wasn't totally on the bandwagon until this year. But he does some things that I just think translate really well to the NFL. I love him at the second level. He's so good against one guy. He always makes him miss because he has these head fakes. He has these subtleties to the game that I just love watching. So I don't have a first-round grade on him because I like Gurley better, but he's my second running back in this class for sure. even with Gurley's injury. I mean, I think Gurley is still a stud. So, but I like Melvin Gordon, so I disagree with you there. Wide receivers, what do you think?
All right, so I already went over Devontae Parker a little bit, and there's a couple wide receivers out there who I'm not super high on, but I do think that guys like Rashad Green, I'm going to go underrated before I go overrated. Guys like Rashad Green and Tyler Lockett are extremely underrated right now. No one's talking about Tyler Lockett like he's a first-round pick, but everything I've seen of him, returner, receiver, everything, says first-round pick. He's very much a Deshaun Jackson type. He's skinny as shit. He's short, but he's fast as hell, and he can catch. I mean, he's Deshaun Jackson to a T, and he's a hell of a returner. I think he's a big reason why Kansas State had a shot at a national title in 2012. He's a big reason, and he's a big play kind of guy. I feel like every single time, Kansas State plays a decent team, he's gonna have he has a big play. He's a gamer. He's a guy who I like because he has his best games against the best teams they play. His three biggest games were Texas Christian, West Virginia, and Baylor. And then when you go down like Oklahoma, he had a solid game, 6 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown. That's a pretty good game. The guy who steps up with his competition, that's someone who I always enjoy watching. A guy who might be a little overrated is Kevin White. Super productive. Super productive. But I'm not understanding what's so amazing about him. Like, yeah, he's probably going to go in the first round, but I don't see anything more than like a Reggie Wayne type, where Reggie Wayne wasn't this spectacular, amazing. I don't think Reggie Wayne has had a career that his stats would suggest. Like, his stats suggest that he's been a top 10 wide receiver his entire career when you just kind of look at him. But you're just like, you know what? He's really not that kind of guy. He's a good receiver, but for the most part, he was a number 2 in a very high-volume offense. So that's Kevin White to me.
The thing about Kevin White, the thing about Kevin White to me is that he high points so well. At the very least, he's going to get a ton of touchdown catches and going to get a ton of jump balls. And I think that'll help to ingratiate him to a lot of teams and a lot sort of like help him work his way into the NFL. So I still think he's really good. I agree with you on Lockett. Not sure I agree with you on Green. I'm a little bit wary of him. But the reason why they're being overlooked is because they're short, and we are wide receiver hype Twitter. But
I'm a wide receiver good Twitter. I don't care how tall
I will say my underrated guy is someone who isn't the tallest guy, and I think he's the player you're thinking about when you're talking about Tyler Lockett and Rashad Green, and that's Philip Dorsett at Miami. The guy just gets open and makes huge plays every time he's on the field. And I think that he's sort of been victimized by the fact that Kaya was sort of learning at the position. And as Kaya got better as season went on, sort of Dorsett. Dorsett makes some insane catches at times. And it's a little bit inconsistent, but so is T.Y. Hilton at Florida International. That's my comp for him. I think Philip Dorsett ends up coming to the NFL, and year one, he gets at least 500 yards receiving and probably also returns a lot too. My overrated guy is someone who's not going to be on my board this year because of off the field. It's Dorial Green-Beckham. I'm not touching him. He has so many problems, so many issues, that there's going to be a team that's going to take him around one because they think that they're going to be able to fix him. I would not touch him. He's not on my board. I won't be ranking him. I won't be sort of using him at all in any of my rankings, any of my tweets. I will not have Dorial Green-Beckham near my team. Period.
How do I put this? I forgot about him because if you don't play due to being an idiot, I'm going to forget about you. Like, It's just what happens with me. If I don't see you play for a whole year of college football, I'm just trying to think of the last two guys to not play for the full year of college football and still be successful. And I'll be probably waiting my entire life to see that list somehow get completed with at least 3 names. Because I can't even think of one who is super successful, who was, at least a Pro Bowl caliber guy.
The only one I
His
can think
final
of
year
is
of college.
Eric Swan, but he even played semi-pro.
Playing semi-pro versus not playing your final year of college is still completely different. Semi-pro is still playing football for a year. So I'm okay with that because he was still out there playing football, getting hit, running routes. Maybe he didn't go to college, but I don't care about that. I'm not saying you've got to go to college. I'm saying I haven't seen the guy who, the year before he played in the NFL, didn't play in college for being an idiot outside of Tyrann Mathieu. That'd be the only one I can think of. And I'm saying that wasn't injured because injury you can't help.
All right, I'm going to be honest. So we're good with receivers. The tight end class is awful. I don't want to talk about any of them because I haven't watched any of them yet, other than Funchess, who isn't a tight end, in my opinion. So let's move on to offensive linemen.
Well, let me just talk about one tight end because I think this guy is going to be.
He's not coming out, though, if it's a player I think you're thinking of.
I think he is going to come out because he's going to realize that he'll be the only guy who comes out and goes in the top 3 rounds, and that's Max Williams.
All right.
He's
I like
a hell
Max
of a
Williams.
blocker, and then he understands how to high point the ball. He's excellent in his routes. He runs the underneath routes exceptionally well. He's not a seam-busting kind of guy, but he's very much a I hate doing this because it's a white-on-white comparison, but Jason Witten. That's what I see.
All right,
I
so I'm
think
going
he
to
is
give
Jason Witten part 2.
give one sleeper just because I did it on Twitter today. There is one tight end in this class that I think is really interesting, and he is a Kansas Jayhawk, and his name is Jimmy Mundine. And I watched him against TCU, and he was really good, and then I watched him a little bit more. He's got a little bit of that Tim Wright, Aaron Hernandez to him. I think a team takes him in round 5 or 6 and tries to use him as a slot guy. But he's literally like, this tight end class is bad. I'm not a fan. I don't like a single tight end in this class from what I've seen. I could see Heuerman. He's gotten better. He's probably the top 10 in the class. But after him, I can't even think of one. Like maybe Gerald Christian, but he's regressed. CJ Uzuma is okay. Ben Koyak, not as good as Nicholas last year. It's just not a very good class. And honestly, I need to watch more of them. Now, offensive line, my overrated guy is TJ Clemmings from Pittsburgh. The guy is just not a complete player right now. He's just not very good. He's extremely raw. Like every time I watch him, he doesn't understand what he's doing yet. And I'm hearing first round hype. It doesn't make any sense to me. I wouldn't touch him before the end of round 2, round 3, because I just don't think he's very good. And I think that a team that picks him is going to be waiting for at least 2 or 3 seasons until he sort of performs to his potential. Underrated is Jacoby Cofield from Duke. I've talked about him before. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's very good.
You think he's
So
got
that's
that
about
Brandon
it.
Thomas size kind of thing going on?
Got the what?
The Brandon Thomas size kind of thing?
Maybe. The thing I like about Cofield is every time I watch him against a good rusher, he performed. I think he's a good athlete, and I think he's a little bit underrated because he went to Duke. That's my honest take.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. For me, my overrated Cedric Aboye. He is a 3rd round to 4th round guy. He's a right tackle only. I say that not because I don't think that he's got the quickness to play left tackle. I say that because he looks clunky, like someone trying to write with their left hand, playing left tackle. I said the same thing about Matt Khalil when he came out of college, that he was a left tackle only. Because whenever he moves to his right, it was like watching someone with their left hand try and write with their right hand. That's all it's about. That's the only time I give those designations. It's like trying to write with your opposite hand. Some people can do it and make it look like words and shapes and colors and whatever, and other people do it and it looks like they were writing with their feet. So I don't think that Cedric Ogbuehi is a left tackle in the NFL. I think he's going to get way overdrafted. I think he's going to be a very average right tackle for his first 2 years because it's going to take him a minute to get used to the power that he has to play with. That being said, my underrated is Cam Irving out of Florida State. I don't know how he's not going to be a top 10 pick. The guy can play every single position on the line, including left tackle. He's extremely quick. He's very technical. He may not be the strongest guy, but as we've seen with Jake Matthews this year, yeah, he had some trouble early, but once he kind of got into it, once he built his strength up a little bit, he's been fine. That's what you got to do. Some of these guys, you just got to throw them into the fire, and then they'll end up doing well. So
I disagree with that, but that's okay. I mean, Jake Matthews, he has gotten better, but I'm going to quickly just pull up his game by game because I know he is still the worst tackle on PFF, mostly because of early in the season, and he has gotten better as the years gone
he had
on.
a 4-game
Actually,
stretch when he was injured.
last game was probably his best game. He didn't give up a single thing, which is great. But yeah, Cameron Irving is not. He should stay at center. He could be a good center. I would keep him at center, to be honest. I think that's an important position. It's underrated.
He can play all five line positions. I agree with you that you can keep him at center. My view is if you're going to take a guy to go out there and play 1,000 snaps, it should take him in the first round. He's playing 1,000 snaps for you. I realize looking at snap counts like that is very Moneyball-esque, if you will. But if you're going to spend that kind of time on a guy who's playing 1,000 snaps, take the guy with your first round pick. That's a wide receiver, a number one wide receiver. That's an offensive tackle, offensive lineman, linebacker, safety, corner. You know, ideally a pass rusher doesn't play 1,000 snaps. Ideally a pass rusher is a second or third round pick that you can build up.
Also, the one thing about the offensive line that I sort of realized, so like probably more than any other position outside of quarterback, so much of it is coaching. Like, it's all technique, it's all improvement, it's all gaining strength. It's the hardest position in my mind to project. So I'm almost in the train of thought where would I rather take a guy who's like a total, unless you're like an Orlando Pace, Walter Jones type of, which I don't think there's any in this draft. I don't think there's been any since Orlando Pace. Do you take sort of a guy who, like, it has all this physical ability, but you question the mental part of their game, or do you take people who you think fit your scheme really well? And I think that you could probably get those guys later. I mean, look at the Patriots. They took Brian Stork in the 4th round. He's been their best interior lineman. They took Cameron Fleming.
That high.
And they nailed the pick. He's been awesome. They took Cameron Fleming. He's been a great 6th offensive lineman for him.
What round did they take Fleming in?
The late, I want to say, it's either 4th or 5th.
Okay, yeah, because I had a 2nd round grade on Fleming. I liked Fleming.
Yeah, he's been like their 6th tight end at times. He's been pretty good. So, I mean, 6th lineman, 3rd tight end. I mean, they definitely, like, I think that there's something to be said for sort of taking guys who fit your scheme over taking talent at the offensive line. And, yeah, I'm not sure I'm on team take offensive line in the 1st round right now. Anyway, edge players.
All right.
Go.
So as I've already said, Hideo Kikaha, way overrated. Another one that's a bit overrated, and I know I'm going to get a little bit of grief for it because I like this player, is Randy Gregory. Not a top 10 pick. Not a top 10 pick by far.
I
Doesn't
agree.
understand.
I agree.
Have you ever seen Anchorman? I don't know how to use my hands. Like, what am I supposed to do with my... That's what he looks like to me. He needs at least a year of coaching before I throw him out there for more than 25-30% of the snaps. At least a year. At least somebody to where he's got a full, 2 pass rush moves that he trusts and understands what to do with. Personally, I wouldn't take him in the first round. Early part of the second, mid part of the second, yeah, but I wouldn't take him in the first. Just because he's so technically retarded. Like, when it comes to his technique, he's just dumb. I don't know how else to explain it. And then he doesn't get great bend coming off the edge, so you're a very linear athlete, and you have trouble with hand usage. So if you're going to be a bull rushing type like Jadeveon Clowney, you've got to actually understand how to use your hands. Clowney understood how to use his hands. Gregory does not. And Gregory doesn't have nearly the power Clowney has. He doesn't have the speed to power conversion that Clowney has. I compare him to John Abraham earlier, and the more I watch him, the more I realize he's Simeon Rice. Rice didn't have the same kind of bend Abraham does. Abraham is very unique in that respect. But Rice knew how to use his friggin' hands. And once Rice really learned how to use his hands in Tampa Bay, as part of that Tampa 2, he got really good. So I do think that he's going to be a good pick for somebody. I just don't think he's a good fit in the first round. Now, underrated, there's a whole mess of guys that are just ridiculously good pass rushers this year. There's a couple that I don't think are getting any run whatsoever. And I understand why, because they're probably like, oh, well, they don't play for any good teams or any of that. But Kurt Magid out of Tennessee, a junior, if he decides to declare, I would take him with a second-round pick in a heartbeat. Not even being talked about, but I would take him with a second-round pick. When you see a guy go out there and all he does is make plays, and all he does is throw offensive linemen around in the SEC, it's fun to watch, and he definitely deserves to be picked high. The other one that I've been very intrigued with is Xavier Dixon out of Alabama. A lot of people are saying he's a mid to late round pick. Again, some guys just know how to play football, and some guys have athletic potential. Dixon's a guy that knows how to play football. He's probably a 4-6 kind of guy. He's probably going to play linebacker in the pros as an outside linebacker, or he's going to be a hand-down defensive end. He reminds me a lot of Charles Johnson with how he wins. I would take him second, third round, and I think he's going to go quite a bit later in real life.
All right, well, first, just because if I didn't say something, I would get called out for being a hypocrite on Twitter. Let's try not to use the R word because it's offensive to a lot of people, as people on Twitter told me when I was talking about it earlier. So we're not going to use that word, or try not to use it. But that aside, I agree with Randy Gregory completely. I think that he is a beast when he wants to be, but he has effort issues.
Sorry,
I saw him take a lot.
He's a technical dipshit.
Fine, yeah, that's a better word. We're just not going to use the other word because that is offensive to a lot of people, so let's try not to use it.
Or dipshit's just offensive to him.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, I think he's a little bit. I have a late first on him as well. I have effort issues with him. I think that he's probably around the same level as prospect as, say, Aaron Lynch might have been last year, where if he sort of gets it together, he could be really good, but I can't have him over some of the guys above him. But But my overrated guy, to be honest, is Trey Flowers from Arkansas. Just because I hear him getting some second round hype, and I just don't see the same athletic ability on a consistent basis that I see from other guys in this class who are a little bit better at sort of getting after the quarterback. Flowers has athleticism. I just don't think it translates very well. And I think he's going to test well, and a team's going to take him a little bit too early. Overrated, I'm going to mess up one of these names so badly. So I'll do the easy one first. The easy one is Shaquille Riddick from West Virginia. 6'5", 240. I think he might be Kakaha. He might be better than Kakaha. We'll probably get him about 3 rounds later. He's really good. We haven't talked about Ray Drew yet. Ray Drew might be my favorite pass rusher on Georgia. I think he's really good, and he's really versatile. And I think that a team's going to get a steal in round 3 with Ray Drew.
He's going to go so much later than round 3.
You think so?
Nothing this year.
But the reason why Ray Drew has done nothing is because they played him at middle linebacker. Like, that's why he's done nothing. I've seen him drop into coverage so much, and he's always made plays.
Ray Drew at middle linebacker?
I saw him play at middle linebacker a lot this year.
Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Because I thought Drew moved to defensive tackle, but he got his rotation cut a butt ton.
Well, all I know is that every time I've watched Georgia, I've seen Drew drop into coverage, which is why I thought his stats weren't as good. I might be thinking about Floyd.
You might be thinking about Floyd, because Drew is number 47.
Yeah, he's the one I see dropping.
At 6'5", 284? I don't know about that.
I've seen him drop multiple times when I watch, so...
I mean, he drops, but he's not playing middle linebacker. He's playing defensive tackle.
Maybe they're playing him in zone drops. I'm not sure Rick's doing at times. Another guy who probably should be
doing zone drops. He's doing zone drops as a defensive tackle because he's been playing a lot of 3 technique this year from what I've seen.
Well, I'll trust you on Georgia. I do like him as a prospect, though. I think we talked about that before, so I'm definitely a fan. But my number 1 sleeper, from what I've seen recently especially, and I am going to murder his name, from UCLA, Owamagbe Odigizua, as somebody called him, Diggy. We're going to call him Diggy. But 6'3", 270, he is a beast. He's really good. And I think that he's going to end up being a really, really nice pick at the end of the second round for the Patriots.
For the Patriots.
Yeah.
That is like the kind of pick that the Patriots would make. We're just going to take this guy, so you have to pronounce his name.
Yeah.
John Gruden 3 times this year.
We already have Omanawanui.
I feel like that's the Patriot kind of like, we're going to troll the NFL. We can take guys just based on their name and have the Key and Peele team and still destroy people.
I mean, but here's the thing. He can play. I mean, he has power. He has a really, really nice rip. And he has the speed to turn the corner, and I think he could be a really, really good left end in the NFL. My comp for him was actually another guy with a great name, Adonijah, the former Bear left end. I think he'd be really good. I think he's going to be a really good left end in the NFL. He can play in a lot of different sets. Do you freeze? I think you froze on me for a second.
I definitely did. Because I felt my computer freeze up for a second, so I was like, yep, I'm just going to be quiet for a second here.
Well, anyway, there's Diggy. Defensive tackle. Interior lineman. I don't like this class. I've said it before. So, go first.
I would need to actually kind of get into watching the defensive tackle, I should say.
Next week, first class we're doing a full show on is going to be the defensive tackles because I have not watched a lot of them because I've been so underwhelmed all year.
There's not a lot where I'm like, oh, hey, hooray, defensive tackle.
Well, I'm forcing you because next week we're going to do an entire show just about the defensive tackles. And we're going to actually see if they're as bad as we think they are. Anyway, so next week we will be doing that. Linebackers.
I'll include Oakman in my study.
Off-ball linebackers.
Off-ball linebackers. All right. Overrated and underrated. I realize this guy's getting top 10 talk, but my underrated pick is out of Washington, Shaq Thompson. He's that damn good. I mean, yeah, he's getting top 10 talk, but he's probably the second or third best player in the class. Probably third best player, because I'm going to say Gerard Holloman is the second best if he declares. And the first is Amari Cooper. Just monster. Just absolute monster. For a better, more realistic, underrated kind of guy, because I'm going to have to put one out there anyway. Because you're going to be like, Shaq Thompson doesn't count.
I think my guy was also pretty much the same sort of idea. So you go first.
Underrated just because everybody's like, well, maybe he's a limited athlete and all that. A.J. Johnson, out of Tennessee.
Oh, I don't like him.
Again, there's a team out there that's going to go, you know what? We need that pounding inside linebacker, and with all that crap that's going on off the field, he'll be an undrafted free agent, and someone's going to pick him up and have a starting middle linebacker for years and years and years out of A.J. Johnson. And he's going to be used in that, that Curtis Lofton, short zone, blitz up the middle, play run defense kind of role.
Well, mine was Eric Kendricks, who is going to be underdrafted, but he's better than his brother. He's a beast in coverage. He's really athletic, and he should be a top of the second round guy, maybe late first. He'll go in the third because he's small.
He's one
later than that, but I'm a fan of his. And then the one that I'd say is overrated is Lyndon Trail from Norfolk State, because I just don't think he's very good.
I don't even know why he's getting talked about.
He's gotten talked about a lot in draft circles. I don't get it. He's also kind of an edge guy, but I just don't get it no matter what. So I'm just going to throw him in there because all the other linebackers are meh, but there are some good ones at the top, and I do like Kendrick, so why don't you like him?
I don't like the way he engages with blockers. It drives me crazy. I feel like if you just targeted him with a good scheme, you could wash him out pretty easily. And I don't like that about linebackers, about some linebackers. But I do think that he's got the ability to get better there. I just don't think he's going to be that ready early. I don't like him as a first or second round guy. I like him as a fourth or fifth round kind of guy. Like if you give me Eric Kendricks in the third to fourth round, I'll take him in a heartbeat. You give me Eric Kendricks in the first or second round, I'm done. Not worth my time. I'm not going to waste my time on Eric Kendricks in the first or second round. I just don't think he's that good. And I'm like team small linebackers. So for me to say that's not great. Yeah. Yeah. Just not a fan of his. I think he gets lost in coverage a little bit too, and it kind of drives me crazy.
All right, so cornerbacks. I don't think you're
talking about.
What?
Is there one worth talking about?
There's one that I think is underrated, but I've been talking about him for a long time, and his name is Senquez Golson from Ole Miss.
Yeah, I love Sanquez too as a
I
nickelback
love Senquez Golson.
or a number two corner. He'd be so good.
I think he would be. I think he's Verrett. I think he's really good. I think
I
he
don't think
could be
I don't
Hayden,
think
but
he's
they
for
want to use him like Hayden, so I'm fine with that.
You know who he
Um,
reminds me of? And this is gonna sound horrible coming from me because of all the crap she yelled at me for. But I think he's very
Grimes.
similar to Grimes.
He's really good. I mean, he's a total ball hawk. I think he's going to get underdrafted, and he'll end up being a really good cornerback for a team. So
I
he's
would take
probably
him.
someone I think is. I'd take him in the second or third.
Yeah, second or third, and have that nickel slash number two in case someone gets hurt kind of guy. That's what he is. I would
I
take
think he's
that
a
in a
perimeter
heartbeat.
guy, to be honest. I think he plays well in space.
You think he's a what kind of guy?
A perimeter guy. I think he plays well in space.
See, I think he's just so quick that you want to use him in the slot, though. I'm not saying he's a true
But I
nickel
think
corner. I'm saying he's a guy who you use him as the nickel because someone else knows how to play outside better than he does.
he's so good in off, though. He could be so good in Ray Horton's defense.
Oh, yeah, well, Ray Horton's a completely different situation. I'm saying not every defense is going to love him like that. Like, in Atlanta, he's a nickel. In Miami, he's a nickel. In Carolina, he's a nickel. You know? And Carolina
So,
started your boy Benny.
I mean, I think that we love Senquez, which is great. There are some other cornerbacks in this class I think are being a little bit underrated, just because I think they're all really good starters. I like Eric Rowe from Utah. I like Ladarius Gunter from Miami, and I really like Bernard Blake from Colorado State. I think those are all really interesting players who can be had in like the fifth round or so and could be number two cornerbacks the first 2 years. Overrated? I mean, I think Trey Waynes needs a lot of work.
I'm going to
Um,
go with all of them.
yeah, I want to hear about this.
Kid from Washington, Peters.
He's awful. Off the field. Not that good on the
He's
field.
awful. On the field, I'm not understanding what people are seeing to say, oh, he's just as good as, some of the number one corners who come out lately. Like, I don't see a number one corner in him. I see a number two at best. I see a guy who makes a lot of plays, but off the field issues, I'm not going to touch him with a 10-foot pole. How do you get kicked off of Washington? Washington. Anyway, safeties. This is a class that I actually really like at safety. Like, really like at safety. Both free and strong. Cody Pruitt out of Mississippi is probably a little bit overrated. I don't think he's got great athleticism, but I do like his size. I see a lot of people saying he's a free safety at the next level, but I see honestly a big linebacker playing safety in him. Or like a small linebacker playing safety in him. The guy who I think would be underrated, and again, I'm probably going to get crap because he's another like Georgia area kind of guy. But it's Jamal Golden out of Georgia Tech. His instincts are ridiculous. He is extremely good at playing the ball. He's a wrap-up tackler. I like watching him in man. I like in man press when he runs it. He's just very... There are just some guys out there who can play multiple spots in the defense, and I think Golden's one of them, where he can play nickel corner, he can play free safety, he can play strong safety. He hits well, he wraps up well, he can return punts, he can return picks. Like, he provides a ton of value to whoever's going to take him. And someone's going to take him in the fifth or sixth round when all's said and done.
All right, well, I'm about to set the internet on fire with my overrated, underrated. I'm going to start my overrated, and it's not because he isn't a great player. First round grade on him. Let's not crown Landon Collins. He's not great in coverage. He has a lot of limitations. He's really good in the box. I think he actually could be best suited as a Dion Buchanan type. He's so good pursuing. I just have some skepticism of him going top 5. I think he's going to end up going in the mid to late first, which is around where he should go, probably late first. Is where I'd have him. I don't think he's as good as Haha was last year, to be honest. And then underrated, I just have one thing to say, because I've been talking about this guy for ages. He's currently rated number 58 overall in the senior class on NFL Draft Scout. I don't know how this happened. Who told people about Quentin Rollins from Miami? Because all of a sudden, everyone is talking about Quentin Rollins, and he's a beast. He's someone who I think should play safety in the NFL. He is a basketball player who switched to football and instantly was one of the best pass defenders, best interceptors in college football, became Miami's #1 cornerback, scared teams away from throwing on him. He is really good, and he should be a really good safety in the NFL. I would take him in the second, probably around where Jimmy Ward went last year.
Yeah, Jimmy Ward. A lot of people loved him, and
he's being used wrong.
Yeah, he's getting used wrong. Whatever. Like, I never saw a corner that I never saw a player in Jimmy Ward that I was like, this guy is going to be great. I saw this guy at best is going to be average in the deep third, and that's about it. He's being used as a slot cornerback right now, so it's not like his best role. I'm going to agree with you there, but he's not this first-round pick that he was. There's just no reason for him to be there.
No, I agree. I mean, I think he's been underwhelming this year, and I think that I'm hoping he ends up playing deeper in the future and can be used more as a ball hawk, as a safety. So that's my hope. But I think Rollins from Miami is really good, so I hope that he gets a chance too. So, anyway, we did not do defensive tackles tonight. We will be doing them next week. It is now homework to watch as many of them as possible. However painful it may be.
Considering this next week at the dealership is going to be very dead, I will probably be doing that quite a bit. The one part about working at a car dealership is you sit there and you watch football, and they go, oh, hey, who is this guy? How's he playing? Or when I was at my old job, it was, oh, hey, get back to work. So, again, I'm enjoying...
We're going to figure out... We're going to figure out if any of these guys are any good. Anyway, this has been a long show. That's it for tonight. We'll be back next Thursday, as we will be every week now, going up to draft season. Ethan here, Scott there. Have a good night.